Hello and welcome everyone to the daily news analysis of 19th of October 2023। तो चलिए आज के इम्पोर्टेंट आर्टिकल हिंदू न्यूज़पेपर से देख लेते हैं वन बाय वन। पहला जो है, इजराइल एंड हमास trade blame over hospital blast. Then GOVT clears bonanza of 15,000 crore for staff. All set for launch. Rapid X offers high-speed travel, modern amenities and at affordable price. Fear factor. C service. The BRI at 10. Some hits, many misses. The Aboriginal referendum in Australia. India will explore building large language models. India likely to sign deals with US for 31 MQ-9B drones by February 2024. Then escalating tensions in Gaza come under sharp focus in civil war scarred Sri Lanka. Then center raises MSP for Rabi crop, farmers unhappy. तो चलिए वन बाय वन देखते हैं सारे 11 आर्टिकल्स को। पहला जो है इजराइल and Hamas trade blame over hospital blast. Dr. Armstrong, by dwindling medical supplies, rushed on Wednesday to save people badly wounded in a massive blast at a Gaza City hospital the day before performing surgery, often without anesthesia on patients lying on floor as Israel kept up its attack on the besieged territory. The Hamas militant group blamed Israel for massive blast at the Al-Ahli hospital, saying nearly 500 died, while Israel blamed a rocket fired by other Palestinian militants. Public outrage over the hospital carnage spread through West Asia as US President Joe Biden landed in Israel in hopes of preventing a wider conflict in the region. Upon his arrival, Mr. Biden embraced Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and expressed concern for the suffering of the Gaza civilians. He later said the hospital blast appeared not to be Israel's fault. Based on what I have seen, it appears as though it was done by the other teams, not you, he told Mr. Netanyahu in remarks in front of the media. Palestinian rocket attacks on Israel resumed shortly before Mr. Biden's arrival after a 12-hour lull. Israel strikes on Gaza also continued on Wednesday, including on cities in South Gaza that Israel had described as a safe zones for Palestinian civilians. After the hospital blast, Jordan cancelled a meeting between Mr. Biden, Jordan's King Abdullah II, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Mr. Biden was now visiting only Israel. The war between Israel and Hamas was pushing the region to the brink. Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi told state-run television the Israeli military held a briefing on Wednesday morning, laying out its case for why it was not responsible for the explosion at the Al-Ahli hospital. Israeli military spokesman Rear Adam Daniel Hagari said it was not firing in the area when the blast occurred, and he said Israeli radar confirmed a rocket barrage was fired by the Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad from a nearby cemetery. At that time of blast, around 6:59 p.m., Hamas called today's hospital blast a horrific massacre, saying it was caused by an Israeli strike. The Islamic Jihad dismissed Israel's claim, accusing Israel of trying hard to evade responsibility for the brutal massacre it committed. Then next day, government clear bonanza of 15,000 crore for staff, putting more money into government employees' hand amid the festive season and ahead of a key assembly poll next month. The Union Cabinet on Wednesday approved a nearly 15,000 crore rupees bounty for them, which includes an extra installment of dearness allowances, representing a 4% hike for employees and pensioners to compensate for inflation. The additional dearness allowance for serving employees and dearness relief for pensioner will be paid out with effect from July 1, 2023 and take the overall payout to 46% of the basic pay or pension amounts. 11.07 lakh rupees sorry, for 11.07 lakh non-gazetted railway employees, a productivity linked bonus PLB equivalent to 78 days wages for the financial year 2022 and 2023 was announced, amounting to 1968 crore rupees, 1968.87 crore rupees. Railway Protection Force and Railway Protection Special Force personnel are excluded from the ambit of this bonus. This combined impact on the exchequer on count of both dearness allowances and dearness relief for pensioner would be 12,857 crore rupees per annum. This will benefit about 48.67 lakh central government employees and 67.97 lakh pensioner, and official statement said, noting that it will recompense them against a price rise. On Tuesday, the government had cleared an ad hoc or non-productivity linked bonus for the last financial year 2022-23, equivalent to 30 days of enrollment and emolument, with a ceiling of 7,000 rupees for non-gazetted Group B employees and Group C employees who are not covered by any productivity-linked incentives. This bonus is also admissible for eligible employees of the armed forces and the central paramilitary forces. The exact outgo on account of this bonus could not be ascertained. Plea to Railway Board reacting to the productivity linked bonus payments announced for 11 lakh 7,346 railway employees. Shiva Gopal Shiva Gopal Misra, General Secretary of All India Men's Federation, requested the Railway Board to ensure railwaymen receive the bonus for before Durga Puja and Dasahara. The cabinet noted that the railways performance was very good in 2022 and 23 as it carried a record cargo of 1509 million tons and nearly 6.5 billion passengers. Payment of PLB will act as an initiative to motivate the railway employees work working towards further improvement on performance. The government said, even as it noted that many factors were responsible for the last year's record performance, including improvement in the infrastructure due to inclusion of record capital expenditure, efficiency in operations, and better technologies. Then next, all set for launch. Rapid X offers high-speed travel, modern amenities at affordable price. Modern amenities and inclusive infrastructure avoid commuters all set to hop on the high-speed train Rapidex which will begin services on a 17-kilometer stretch of Delhi Meerut Regional Rapid Transit System (RRTS) after its inaugural by Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday. The train will stop at 5 stations painted in the tortoise and beige Sahibad, Sahibabad, Ghaziabad, Guldhar, Duhai and Duhai Depot on the stretch, which is part of the 82-kilometer Delhi Meerut corridor that is expected to be fully operational by 2025. The Hindu took a ride on Rapidex ahead of its maiden journey and witnessed the train, which boasts an average speed of 100 kilometers per hour, zoom past cars on the Delhi Meerut Expressway. The train has five standard coaches with one reserved for women and a premium coach, while a ticket for a seat in the standard coach costs 20 rupees. Passengers have to sell out double double that amount to enjoy a ride in the premium coach, and to end travel in a standard coach will cost a total of 50 rupees and 100 rupees in the premium coach. Travel is free for children whose height is below 90 centimeter. Commuters can enter the station from gates located on the service lanes of the expressway. Parking spaces is available for those using personal vehicles to reach the station. Multiple entry-exit points have been provided on either side of the road at every station. A foot overbridge has been constructed for those who wish to cross the road to take a train ride of reach the bus terminal. QR code based paper tickets can be purchased from the counters or ticket vending machines installed at the stations using currency notes, bank cards, or unified payment interface. The TVMS can also be used to recharge National Common Mobility Cards (NCMC). The RRTS system will allow commuters to use any NCMC card from the first day of operation. Commuters can also travel by purchasing a QR code based digital ticket using the RapidX Connect mobile application. Each station has two floors. All commuters have to enter through the automatic fare connections collections gates on the ground floor, which will deduct the fare amount from their tickets depending on their destination. They will then have to use lifts, escalators, and staircases to reach the platform on the second floor. Premium lounge. Passenger traveling on the premium coach will have to pass through additional AFC gates on the boarding platform, which will deduct an additional amount from the ticket for using the luxury compartment. These passengers will also gain access to the premium lounge, which is furnished with foam velvet seats and has vending machines that offer chips, chocolates, filled fried peanuts, and fruit juice. While all coaches have large window seats with velvet finish, the premium coach has reclining seats, extra legroom, and adjustable sun shields. The platform are equipped with a public addresses system that will announce the arrival of upcoming trains, route map of the multiple stops, and a detailed action plan to evacuate commuters during emergencies. Special doors. Every station has platform screen doors integrated with the train doors and signaling system. The train will leave the station only after the main doors and the PhDs are firmly closed. All doors have first of its kind manual locks that passengers can unlock to open the doors at a station in case they fail to open automatically. Each compartment has two rows of seats on either side of the spacious agile where passenger can stand and travel. Safety handles have been provided above and below the seats to ensure passenger safety. Multiple CCTVs are installed in every coaches with field officer at the respective stations reviewing the footage and passing on information to the local units during emergencies. All stations have diaper changing stations, separated restrooms for women, and first aid kits for medical emergencies. Ambulance services can be availed through centralized accidents and trauma services. The last coach has additional space for stretchers, and wheelchairs, and a ramp to enter. And all elite from the train. Women are expected to comprise 50% of the staff at all stations. Preference will be given to residents of the neighboring areas during recruitment to ensure employment of locals. The next step, fear factor. Food and fuel prices may yet play sole spot in the inflation battle. Inflation faced by consumers eased to 5% in September, bringing some relief after a sharp rally in prices that began with July's 15-month high inflation rate of 7.44%. This not only marks a return to the 2% to 6% tolerance range of Reserve Bank of India, but also matches the bank's upgraded estimate of 6.4% average inflation between July and September. Of course, the preferred inflation rate may remains 4% at the RBI will remain resolutely focused on durably attaining that by its own reckoning. The target appears distant. This quarter is expected to average 5.6% inflation, followed by 5.2% between January and June 2024. Even these expectations may need to be tempered while the RBI has projected an average inflation of 5.4% in 2023 and 24. The International Monetary Fund and World Bank raised their estimates this month to 5.5% and 5.9% respectively. So September's 5% inflation, which was partly aided by base effect from 2022 when the inflation pace was 7.4% and partly by a sharp dip in volatile price too of tomatoes and vegetables with a little help from the center's LPG price cuts is unlikely to sustain or cool further. Although food inflation, which had spurred the spike in the price through July and August, has eased to 6.6% in September, this was disproportionately influenced by crashing vegetables price even as the inflation pace accelerated for pulses, fruits, eggs, and sugars. Cereals and spices inflation remained sticky and 11% and 23.1% respectively. Rural inflation remained higher than that faced by urban consumers, and with the erratic monsoon hurting Kharif season swing in crops like pulses and uncertainties about the El Nino's effect on the Rabi crops, weak rural demand as well as food price pressures remain a source of concern for the economy. The wholesale price index released on Monday shows pulses prices spiked 17.7% while the onions rose 55% in the September compared to 10.4% and 31.4% in August respectively. At 0.26% wholesale price rise just about stayed in deflationary mode for the sixth month on the back of double digit uptick through the same period last year, but that streak may be nearing its end. The government has held retail fuel price since the last May and may even be tempted to cut them ahead of critical elections, but producers facing the brunt of higher global oil and gas prices, which rose at an 8-month high pace of 15.6% in September, have been raising prices for 2 months now. Global prices for urea that India in largely imports are up to 20% since March. These will start to feed into retail prices soon. So it is not time to celebrate cooling inflation yet. The next is sea services. The commencement of passenger ferry services between the Konkan Santhurai in Sri Lanka's northern province and Nagapattinam in Tamil Nadu last week marked the fulfillment of a long-standing demand across the Pal Strait for the revival of a sea link. Sri Lanka's civil war, which lasted nearly 25 years, has disrupted the movement of people and goods on traditional maritime routes Talai Mannar to Rameswaram and Colombo to Thoothukudi. 12 years ago, a ferry service between Colombo and Thoothukudi did not last long due to a lack of patronage. There was also a popular boat mail connecting Chennai and Talai Mannar via Rameswaram and Dhanushkodi through a rail link and a ferry, which non-Agenarian recall the cyclone in December 1964, which devastated Dhanushkodi and the civil war ended in the multiple transport links, forcing people in the both countries to rely only on air services, which cover Madurai and Tiruchi too. These days, 10 months ago, the Chennai Jaffna air service resumed, and according to an estimate, 10,000 tourists from India visited Sri Lanka over 6 months. The inauguration of a private cruise service in Chennai 4 months ago facilitated visits by 6,000 passengers to the island nation, as pointed out during the launch of Nagapattinam Konkan Santhurai service. The development would not only strengthen cultural, economic, and civilization ties but also improve coordination cooperation in disaster management and maritime security. It may at some stage also enable seamless voluntary repartition of thousands of refugees from Sri Lanka living in Tamil Nadu. Normal operation of service it ran for a few days this month are to resume in January in view of the northeast monsoon. By then it is hoped that the authorities, especially in India, would take steps in the interest of the sustainability of the ferry services with a fare of around 7,670 a person for a journey. The difference between this rate and airfares is not competitive enough for anyone to opt for the ferry. Increasing the baggage allowance of 50 kg would help the provision of amenities in Nagapattinam port such as a dormitory and improving rail connectivity at Nagapattinam require attention as passengers from Sri Lanka are sure to want to visit Chennai. On the part of Sri Lanka economist, policymaker and activists should consider promoting economic ties including exports from the northern province given the inherent systematically bilateral relationship. Ultimately sustained policy attention is critical to making these services success. After all, Nagapattinam is predominantly agrarian and one of the economically backward stops of Tamil Nadu, so it is up to the governments of the two countries to ensure that the Nagapattinam Konke ferry service does not meet the fate of the Thoothukudi Colombo service. Then next, the BRI at 10. Sorry. The BRI at 10, some hits and many misses. The Third Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation that was convened in Beijing, China, October 17-18 has put the spotlight back on Chinese President Xi Jinping's signature initiative. Early debates in China reveal the inherent intent behind the Belt and Road Initiative. Academic Su Li likened the BRI to China's Marshall Plan, stating that it was a gateway for China to transition from a regional power with global influence to a global power with comprehensive strength. Academic Wang Wei argued that the BRI was an accident. China's bid to reboot globalization and rectify its shortcomings. Rising China also felt the need to develop new transport and trade arteries as alternatives since rivals could put the squeeze on Strait of Malacca. The jugular vein for China's economy. Beijing was also putting its money where its mouth was with the establishment of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank with 100 billion war chest challenging other lending institutions in the assessment of scholar Zhu Zhejian. The AIIB would enable Mr. C to harvest early gains of BRI. At the onset, Mr. C was pitching for the use of local currency and trade, thus in effect elbowing out the dollar. In this way, he began building an economic order centered on China as a excise vehicle. The BRI, which was launched shortly after Mr. Xi got the top job, also served as a vehicle for him to brand himself as a global statesman and project China's power and influence overseas. Domestically, the initiative entered the Communist Party of China Constitution in 2017 and got top billing in the 14th five-year plan announced in 2021. The Chinese government's white paper on BRI released this month. The Belt and Road Initiatives, a key pillar of the global community of a shared future, revealed that over 200 BRI cooperation pact had been linked with over 150 nations. The document also stated that total two-way investment between China and partner countries from the 2013 and 2022 touched $380 billion. As Mr. Xi himself put it, the BRI would provide more public goods to entire world, highlighting the massive infrastructure deficit. According to the World Bank, 675 million people are without electricity globally. Around 2.3 billion lack potable water and 450 million live beyond the coverage of a broadband signal. The lending institution calculates that bridging the infrastructure gap will need capital infusion of 1.5 trillion annually through 2030, which is approximately 4.5% of the GDP of low and middle income countries under China's Marshall Plan. Motorways, power plant, ports, railway networks, and digital infrastructure have been built the ugly reality. But the tale of Chinese munificence is made by some unsavory ground realities. A report from the Isias Yusuf Isaac Institute on the BRIs has highlighted issues related to ecologically damaged displacement of people, disputes over payouts, and labor unrest. The findings detail case studies of Indonesia where things came to a head over anxieties related to Chinese laborers filling up positions earmarked for locals in Laos. The glistening superfast trains and impressive dam project over the Mekong River cannot hide the woes of those left high and dry due to lack of compensation or other on whom droughts due to dam construction project have wreaked havoc. Add data estimates that Laos would owes China around $12.2 billion, about 65% of its GDP. The China-Pakistan economic corridor was conceived over a framework that ties between the two nations were deeper and than the ocean, sweeter than honey, and higher than the Himalayas. Yet, a Pakistani legislative report on Earth that while China cornered 91% of Gwadar port's revenue, Pakistan pocketed just 9%. These issues have tarnished the reputation of the brand BRI, especially its tagline of win-win cooperation, as there are perceptions that it is a win for China twice over at the cost of other stakeholders. Global alternatives as much hand-wringing efforts are being taken to counter the BRI. In the Donald Trump era, the United States and Japan initiatives in its and Japan initiated the United States Japan infrastructure investment alternatives in the Indo-Pacific region. The Joe Biden administration announced the Build Back Better World B3W initiative that seems to have been recognized as the partnership for global infrastructure and investment, which aims to channelize private capital into climate change and energy security, healthcare and health security, digital technology, and gender equity. Here it must be noted that India has steadfastly opposed the CPEC over the issues related to sovereignty and had raised concern over issues of unsustainable debt, yet like Cassandra's warning, they could not convince hearts and minds in the thrall of China's narrative. The G20 Delhi Summit posited yet another alternative in the form of India Middle East Europe corridor IMEC that seeks to link India, West Asia, and Europe through railways and shipping lines. In addition to the trade connectivity, electricity, and digital infrastructure, as well as pipelines for clean hydrogen exports have been envisioned. It is too early to access the alternatives, but all eyes will be on the future of BRI as it completes a decade. At a time when Beijing is grappling with economic worries related to debt and unemployment, it remains to be seen how it will reinvigorate the project of the century. Then next is the Aboriginal referendum in Australia. A majority of Australian voters have rejected the proposal to establish an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders voice to Parliament, with the final results like to be about 40% voting yes and 60% voting no. What was the referendum about? In this referendum, Australians were asked to vote on whether to establish an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament. The voice was proposed as a means of recognizing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first people of Australia in the Constitution. The voice proposal was a modest one. It was to be an advisory body for the national parliament and government. Had the referendum succeeded, Australia's constitution would have been amended with a new section 129 as stated below. In recognition of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people as the first people of Australia, that is, there shall be a body to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders Voice to the Aboriginal and Torres State Islander voice may make representation to the Parliament and Executive Government of the Commonwealth on matters related to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Third, the Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, including its composition, functions, powers, and procedures. This proposal was drawn from the Uluru Statement from the Heart of Uluru Statement from the Heart is a 2017 petitioner to the people of Australia, written and endorsed by the Australian Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander leaders. The document calls for constitutional change and structural reform through the creation of two new institutions, a constitutionally protected First Nation voice and a Makarrata Commission to oversee agreement and truth-telling between government and the First Nations from 2050. Indigenous leaders, which called for three phases of reforms, voice followed by treaty and truth telling about Australia's colonial history. The proposal was constitutional change to ensure the voice would not be abolished by government in future as previous indigenous bodies have been. How did Australian vote? Voting is compulsory in Australia. Every eligible Australian citizen over 18 years of age is obliged to vote in election and a referendum. Australia has one of the highest rate of voter turnout in the world. Over 90% of those eligible have voted in the every national election since compulsory voting was introduced in 1924. Australia has a written constitution. A successful referendum vote is required to change the constitution in any way. To succeed, a referendum proposition requires a double majority. This means it must be agreed to by a majority of voters and a majority of states. Australia has six states, so at least four must have a majority of voters in favor for a referendum to success. Australia also has two territories. Individuals in the territories contribute to overall vote, but the territories do not count towards the majority of states. It's very difficult to achieve constitutional change in Australia since Federation in 1901. 45 questions have been put to Australian voter in the referendum. Only 8 of those have succeeded in this voice referendum. Only the Australian Capital Territory voted yes by majority. A clear majority of the national electorate voted no. All states returned majority no results. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people constitute 3.8% of Australia's population. The government members claim on ABC TV in the referendum coverage that polling booths, including high portfolio of indigenous voters, for example, Palm Island in Queensland, returned high yes votes. However, in a majoritarian democracy like Australia, such a small proportion of national population cannot dictate the outcomes of a national polls. Importantly, the voice referendum did not have unanimous support across the two main political parties in Australia. The Labour government announced the end has campaigned for yes. The leader of the opposition, Liberal Queensland MP Peter Dutton, campaigned strongly against the referendum proposal. What happened now? The government is bound to abide by the referendum result. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has confirmed that his government will not seek to legislate a voice of as an alternative to the constitutional model. Albanese conceding the failure of a referendum, said tomorrow we must seek a new way forward. He called for a renewed focus on doing better for the first people in Australia. The referendum outcome represents a major loss for government, but much more important than that will be negative impact of the campaign and loss of on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. On ABC TV, Arenet Lurija woman Catherine Liddell called a renewed focus on truth telling and building understanding on Australia's history across the population. She said the failure of the referendum reflected a lack of understanding about the lives and experiences of indigenous people in Australia. Yes, campaign advocates reports devastating at the outcomes. Sana Nakata writing here said, now we are where we have always been left to build our better future on our own. Some First Nations advocates, including Victorian Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe, A. Gunai Kundimara, and Jab Urung women argued the voice proposal lacked a substance and that the referendum should not have been held. Advocates of progressive no votes who felt the voice did not go far enough will continue to call for recognition of continuing First Nation sovereignty and self-determination through the processes of treaty and truth telling. The information landscape for Australian voters leading up to this referendum was murky and difficult to navigate. The Australian Electoral Commission published a disinformation register, misinformation and lies. Many circulated through social media have influenced the decision making of a proportion of voters. It's open to question whether constitutional change of any kind can be achieved while voters remain so exposed to multiple versions of truth. For many First Nation people, the proliferation of lies and misinformation driven by racism throughout the voice debate have been traumatizing and brutal. Indigenous Australian Minister Wiradjuri woman Linda Bourne spoke to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people after the result. We be proud of your identity, be proud of the 65,000 years of history and culture that you are part of. Her pain was patently obvious as the responded to the referendum outcomes. Then India will explore building large language model. India will set up a high-powered committee to explore the development of a large language model or LLMS tools that harness artificial intelligence to create applications that can understand and process human language. The Union government's principal scientific advisor Ajay Sood said on Wednesday LLMs are cornerstone technology underlying several pieces of intelligent software and help make possible applications such as ChatGPT. A high-powered committee is being set up to explore such LLMs and especially how this can be applied to Indian languages. Dr. Sood said, speaking at Tech Surge, a summit is jointly organized here by the venture capital firm Celesta Capital, the US-India Business Council, and the Quad Investor Network. The Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor had put on a draft National Deep Tech Startup Policy for public commitment on July 31. The purpose of the policy is to ensure India's position in the global deep tech value chain in areas such as semiconductor, artificial intelligence, and space technology. India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant said that India's success in developing an array of technology applications such as digital payment had made it a natural ecosystem for deep tech. However, India needs a fund of funds, that is a significant amount of private foreign capital along with government funds to finance promising startups. There were relatively long term known as the present capital. He said US India collaboration. US Ambassador to India Eric Gar- Garcetti remarked that India and US were at the best point of in their relationship in many years, making it an ideal time for both countries to collaborate on deep tech. If we talk in terms of, say, a Facebook status for a long time, the relationship status was it's complicated. Now it has moved to in a relationship. He said there are no two nations on this globe who together can do this work better, fill each other's weakness with the other's strength, and show a model of what it means to do it with the democratic values that put people in the center of this technological resolution. He added, the opportunities that present itself the term of collaboration and engagement between both countries are limitless. Celesta Capital Managing Partner Arun Kumar said, "Deep tech is a buzzword in tech and startup circles. India's draft policy document on deep tech cities, Startup India's database, which claims that there are 10,298 startups recognized by the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, which are classified across various subsectors within the larger deep tech space as of May 2023. Then next, India likely to sign deal with US for 31 MQ-9B drones by February 2023. Sorry, 2024. The deal for 31 MQ-9B unmanned aerial vehicle UAV with the US is expected to be conducted by February 2024. Deliveries will begin from February 2027. 3 years from the signing of the contract, defense sources says the deal is on the track, and a letter of an acceptance is now awaited from the US. The contract is expected to be concluded by February 2024. A defense source with knowledge of matter said on Wednesday the UAV maker General Atomics is scheduled to establish a global maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility in India, but its location has not yet been finalized, the source said, adding that it could likely be in Bengaluru. In June, the Defense Ministry cleared the procurement of 31 MQ-9B UAVs from GA, including 15 Sea Guardians from the Navy and 8 Sky Guardians each for the Army and the Air Force at an estimated cost of $3,072 million through the US foreign military sales route following this last month, just ahead of the talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden on the sidelines of G20 summit. The ministry issued the letter of request to the US government based on the LOR of the US government, and the ministry will finalize the LOA. Details of equipment and terms of the procurement will be negotiated and finalized in the accordance with the FMS program. The ministry said earlier, as part of the process, the US administration will have to notify the US Congress of the sale. The deal has to be approved by the Cabinet Committee on Security of Indian Government, after which the contract will be concluded. Sorry, sorry, escalating tensions in Gaza come under sharp focus in civil war scarred Sri Lanka. The escalating tensions in Gaza have come under the sharp focus in Sri Lanka as an island nation that is struggling to get out of its own devastating civil war nearly 15 years after it ended. While President Ranil Wickremesinghe recently called for a four-state solution involving Israel, Gaza, Palestine, and Lebanon to resolve the crisis, he also shared his concerns with caretaker Prime Minister of Pakistan, Anwar ul Haq Kakar. On Tuesday, the regional leaders are currently in China to attend the Third Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation, according to an update. posted by the Pakistani Prime Minister's office on social media platform X. The two leaders expressed deep concern at the grave humanitarian situation in Gaza caused by the organized ongoing Israel attacks. They call for they called for immediate cessation for hostilities by Israel, establishment of a humanitarian corridor to provide aid to the besieged people of Gaza, and a two-state solution resulting in the establishment of a viable and contiguous Palestinian state with the pre-1967 borders and all Quds, all Sharif as its capital, the post said, expressing solidarity. Meanwhile, a key political actor from the different parties in Sri Lanka have voiced concern over on the ongoing violence. Leader of opposition Sijit Premadasa has called for an urgent parliamentary debate on the issues while observing that state terrorism was leading to hundreds of deaths on Wednesday. Mr. Premadasa presented a motion urging the House to call upon the United Nations to convene its Security Council to end the ongoing conflict during the hospital bombing in Gaza massacre. He urged the permanent members of the UN to take necessary measures to stop the ongoing terrorism and state terrorism. The Gaza hospital attack comes a day before Sri Lanka's Tamil who bore the brunt of violence long civil war commemorate the brutal attack on the Jaffna Teaching Hospital in 1987 by members of Indian peacekeeping forces. Some 17 civilians, including 21 medical personnel, were killed on October 21, 1987. Prominent leaders have also visited the Palestinian embassy in Colombo to express solidarity. Former President Mahinda Rajapaksa emphasized the urgency of a peace in his recent meeting with the Palestinian ambassador Mr. Rajapaksa office said. Then आजकल जो लास्ट आर्टिकल है सेंटर raises MSP for Rabi crops farmers are unhappy. The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs has increased the minimum support price for all Rabi crops for the financial year 24-25. The increase for wheat, the major Rabi crop, is 150 per quintal, and the new price will be 2275 rupees. Farmers organization have criticized the major increase. The center procures wheat from about a dozen wheat growing districts in Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. The two states are among those that will witness upcoming assembly elections. The highest increase in the MSP compared with the last year for it is for lentils at 425 rupees per quintal. New price 6400 to 25 per quintal, followed by rapeseed and mustard at 200 per quintal. New MSP 5650 per quintal. Farmer organization said the MSP did not match the increase in input cost. Fertilizer, diesel prices have increased, said All India Kisan Sabha leaders from Rajasthan. Amra Ram, coordinator of Bharatiya Kisan Union, Pavel Kusa, asked where is the procurement? Without procurement, MSP is meaningless. So friends, this is all for today, and I mean, we will continue from tomorrow onwards. So till then, thank you. Bye bye. Have a good day.